Last week on the Level Up Fishing podcast, we covered our ice fishing checklist. And this week, we brought in a special guest to talk about ice safety.
So welcome to the Level Up Fishing podcast. I'm Andy Cochran.
I'm Stormy Cochran.
And joining us today is our ice team leader, Cody Rowe, to go through with everyone a lot of the stuff that we really emphasize going on and off the ice all winter long, and a lot of things to look for that maybe we can help educate you on types of ice, thickness, hardness, what's fishable ice versus what's not, what kind of equipment you should have, and all those other ideas.
So thanks for joining us, Cody.
Thank you guys for having me. Excited to go over some of the ice safety stuff and kind of help educate people and make sure you're staying safe out there.
So before you even hit the ice, what are some things you need to have with you?
So yeah, some of the few things I like to have with me, probably one of the most important things is an ice pick or a spud bar. That way, as you're going out, you can be kind of hitting the ice in front of you to make sure how thick it is. With my spud bar, I have the Rapala. I generally say if it takes at least 2 hits or more to get through the ice, it's usually around 2 inches, and then I can kind of test it further with my auger from there. But I'd say the ice pick is a big thing when you're going out on new ice or thin ice. Spud bars are definitely a big thing. Another good one is a whistle for if you're alone, which I don't recommend. Going on new ice, having a buddy with you is always a good idea. A rope to either throw to somebody or have a buddy throw to you. And then one that is optional but is getting really more popular is the float suits that a lot of these companies are making that will help you float long enough that somebody will be able to see you. Or a life vest is also another option if you don't have the float suit.
I absolutely love the new designs on all these ice suits. They're warm and they're going to help you if you fall in. I really love that. Way to go for all these companies improving all those suits.
Yeah, I think a lot of them say they can help you float up to 45 minutes.
That's literally between like you getting out or not. I think that's outstanding.
Yeah, so we live in a ice box in Gunnison, Colorado, so most of us that ice fish already have winter clothes anyways, but more and more of us are really getting more into the ice fishing specific suits, and a lot of that is because of the flotation. If you're out there in your snowboard gear and you go in water, that stuff's just going to get wet and pull you down. So even though you might already have some really awesome active winter gear that you wear anyways, we would highly recommend looking at companies like Striker and getting yourself an ice fishing specific suit that floats, and then you might actually like it so much that it becomes your new winter clothing anyways.
From a guide perspective, how much of this do you think a client should have?
So I have extra spud bars for if we are going on thin ice for a few of the clients to have. As far as all the other stuff, I think it's kind of optional. I usually have a whistle and a rope. Multiples probably wouldn't be a bad idea, but I just carry one of each. Going on thin ice, if they want to have a life vest or something like that, wouldn't hurt. But I think with multiple people, you probably don't need too many extras of everything, since you're able to, one person, not all of you hopefully will fall through, and one of you can use that equipment to help rescue the other person.
And with that being said, if you are going out ice fishing and your guide does not have any of that stuff, please don't go unless you feel 100% good out there on the ice. So with that, let's go to thickness guidelines.
So yeah, you always hear the question, what is safe ice? Me personally, no ice is ever safe ice because there's so many different variables that can go into that, which we'll kind of get into in a little bit. But going off kind of a lot of ice thicknesses that you'll see all over the place, they kind of say 2 inches or less, stay off of it unless you're familiar with ice and you really know what you're doing, or you have a buddy with you. 4 inches is kind of where they say, ice fishing is fishable. I guess if you want to say. 5 to 7 inches is what they recommend for snowmobiles and ATVs. Getting higher than that, we don't have to worry about that too much as far as cars and trucks, at least in Gunnison. But 8 to 12 inches is cars and small trucks. And then 12 to 15 inches is medium trucks. More just saying that so getting on 12 inches of ice, it is suitable to hold a car.
And we talked about that word fishable last week, but we should recap that a little bit. We were asked specifically by the National Park Service not to ever say that ice is safe, because a lot of people assume that ice is safe when really ice is never safe. You're on frozen water, and we're going to talk about it more later on, but there are several different types of ice. So come late ice, you can be standing on 12 inches of ice and still go through because it's not stable. So if you guys ever hear us say safe ice, please call us out on it, because it's not safe. We use the word fishable ice. And with that also being said, go wherever you feel comfortable. If the ice is 5 inches and you still don't feel comfortable, that's okay. Some people don't go out until it's 12 inches or more, and that's okay. It's whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and then kind of going into a math equation for ice strength, which was created by the U.S. Army Cold Regions Research and Engineering Branch. This will kind of just give you something to go off of. If you know what the thickness is for sure, you can kind of get a better idea of what the ice could hold. And this is for clear ice, which is the best ice, the strongest ice. And so that equation is P equals 50, and then in parentheses, you have T times T. Now, P is the load-bearing capacity of the ice in pounds, and T is the thickness. So let's say you have 2 inches of ice, so you would do 2 times 2, which is 4, and then 50 times that, which would be 200. So they say 2 inches of ice can hold 200 pounds, being clear ice. I know we said 2 inches or less not to fish on. That being said, like I said, if you know ice, you feel comfortable on it, then that is what clear, hard, good ice can hold.
What comes to mind for me is the ice addiction tournaments. Surely they use some kind of equations when they're drilling 1,200 holes in an area to figure out if it can hold 900 anglers. I assume they do something similar to that to figure out all of that, because man, there's a lot of anglers out on the ice in one area. So let's cover the different types of ice since we're here.
So yeah, we kind of talked about clear ice, which we said is the safest ice. It doesn't have anything, as far as bubbles or anywhere it like froze and thawed maybe. So yeah, clear ice is definitely the safest ice, although it can be a little frightening being able to see through the ice. I still myself am a little sketch on clear ice, but you just got to remember that is the safest ice, and it is pretty cool to see the fish coming up underneath it also.
That is neat.
Yeah, and one thing to say about clear ice is it's also very, very slippery ice.
Yes.
And so another, piece of equipment that we utilize a lot are ice cleats for your boots, or yak tracks or something like that, studs in your boots, literally so you can walk on it to start with. So one more kind of piece of equipment it's easy to carry, it's lightweight, doesn't take up any room, just have it in your ice fishing gear in case you get to a place where it's new clear ice, or if the wind's been blowing the last couple days and it blew any snow cover off the ice. That can be equally as much of a safety equipment thing, keeping some ice cleats in your stuff just so that you can safely move across the ice.
Good point.
Yeah, and kind of going with that, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Corkers fly fishing boots that have the interchangeable soles. They also make a winter boot, which I use myself, very warm boot, and it does have the interchangeable soles. So you can have just the rubber sole, or you can have a rubber sole with the studs in them to get the traction on clear ice also.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think the boots I'm running are from a company called Norfin, and they have, underneath they have like flip out ice cleats. So you can fold them in if you're walking around somewhere where you don't want to be tearing up what's underneath you, but if you get in a position where you need them, you just get to the bottom of your boot and flip out the cleats real quick and keep going. So there's a lot of other options out there too.
So yeah, going into the next type of ice we'll talk about called snow ice. And that is where you have snow falling in between where the ice is kind of forming. So you have kind of like a layer of good ice and then kind of a layer of frozen snow. So if you cut a cross section or if you drill your hole and you see clear ice and then you'll see kind of like milky colored ice, that's snow ice, which is not going to be as strong as clear ice because you don't have that solid ice forming. You have kind of a frozen snow layer in there. So going into candled ice, that's typically ice that we see in the spring. It's definitely your chunkier ice, kind of your longer crystals, where a lot of times those warmer temperatures will create bubbles. You'll get bubbles coming up through the ice that are actually penetrating through the ice, and definitely a weaker ice for sure. Still a fishable ice if you are being careful and testing it, but something you just need to be careful about watching that candled ice as it is not as strong.
I don't like that ice. I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, that's the stuff in the spring when stuff starts to melt out and the ice sheets really start to move around and you'll get a big wind event and it'll blow sheets of ice up onto the bank. It's absolutely beautiful, gorgeous looking ice. Like it literally looks like some kind of a crystal, or they're almost, inches long but not very big around in diameter, almost like sticks of ice that are basically like stuck together, and that kind of stuff can crumble and fall apart regardless of how thick it is. So that's when we look at when we're looking at ice out and how long we can comfortably fish going into ice out. So that the candle ice is really cool looking, but it's like the least supportive ice that there is.
That's the stuff that Hunter broke through in the spring.
Yeah.
When it was still 12
inches. And it was like
thick.
12 inches thick and literally just stepped right through it.
And we've had our daughters do that. And it's not so much they broke through the ice, but you'll see that layer of snow and then there's slush and water underneath. And then you actually get to the ice. I will never forget Carly. She was like 7. And she broke through that layer of crusted snow into the slush, and her foot was suddenly wet, and she thought she was going in. She was sure she was done. Yeah. I'm like, I promise the lake is still really thick under you, but she was positive she had just fallen in Blue Mesa in the winter.
I was out there in the spring a couple of years ago, and everything was frozen in the morning, and then later in the day as it started warming up, it all started getting slushy on top, and it was getting a little late in the season for sure.
It makes you, like even for seasoned fishermen, those kinds of situations, you're like, wait, am I good? Yeah, am I good still?
Right. Next thing we'll go into is pressure ridges. There is several different types of pressure ridges. You can have either 2 sheets pushing up, so it almost creates like a upside down V. You can have 2 sheets going down where it creates a V. Or you can have them kind of overlaying each other, so you have one going over the top of the other one. And around these pressure ridges, you definitely need to be careful. Don't recommend walking around them or even driving anything around them. They're definitely a lot weaker. You have open water potentially. That water can kind of melt those edges, and they are just not safe to be around at all.
And on our home lake on Blue Mesa, we have like historical areas where pressure ridges occur, like near the pinnacles. But we also see anglers that just don't care, that just go right over them, and it blows my mind.
Yeah, we've got story after story from guides, friends, other people getting near and around these pressure cracks in the winter and having near catastrophic events happen. It is not something to play around with. I mean, how pressure ridges form is obviously ice expands and it has to go somewhere. And so a lot of times one sheet of ice will form, and like 2 weeks later a new section of the lake will freeze and that ice will start to form. So where that seam is between what was open water and what was frozen is kind of where those pressure cracks will happen. And the most common one we see is where one sheet of ice will climb on top of the other one as it expands. And sometimes there can literally be like 4-foot wide caverns of dead space or open water in between those two sheets of ice. And all it takes is one windstorm overnight to like cover up all that stuff where you literally can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard of so many people that'll just be driving across the lake on their snowmobile or their four-wheeler, and then all of a sudden the bottom just falls out from under them and they're stuck in a 4-foot hole in the ice. And it's like, talk about being scared.
Yeah.
And so if you see a seam, and it'll pretty much go across the entire width of the lake, if you see that, the best thing to do is just hit the shoreline and go around it and then get back on the ice. Like, don't ever try to find a low spot or a flat spot across the pressure ridge and try to cross it. Just go around it.
So kind of going on kind of with safety on the ice, rocky shorelines, especially in the spring or warm days, those rocks and or boat ramps will heat up. They're going to absorb that heat and they will make that ice weak. So you see this a lot at Elk Creek Marina, Lake Fork Marina, going down. That ice, guys, will kind of fall through. You'll see that getting cracked. So just be careful getting on or off the lake, especially in the afternoons or warmer days. Like I said, in the springtime, that ice can get very weak and thin because it is absorbing that heat from a solid object and melting it.
You'll see, guys, they're determined to get on that ice. So
Oh, yeah.
they'll put boards across it, and some people absolutely love it, but please just be safe out there. Let's talk about cracking ice.
Cracking ice. Cracking ice is always scary. I don't care how long you've been on the ice. Big cracks still personally get me to flinch a little bit. It means, like Andy said, that ice is creating new ice. It's expanding. So that cracking is usually that ice pushing against each other. It's getting thicker. It's building ice. So as scary as they are, it is something that is generally good because it means it's creating thicker, more ice.
I was out there fishing by myself once at Elk Creek in the spring, and it was so nice. It had to have been, I don't know, 25, 30 degrees out there. But the sun was shining, so I didn't use an ice hut. And no joke, the ice cracked straight through the center under my chair, and I was out. I was done. I was like, nope, I'm good.
That's always been a term that we've heard for a long time, is loud ice is good ice. Like Cody said, it's actually building on itself and it's expanding, so it has to pop and crack so that it can expand and create it, more holding weight. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's certainly a scary thing.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the cracks happen in real time.
Yeah.
You hear a loud and a bang, and all of a sudden there's a crack that wasn't there 5 minutes ago going right through the middle of your hole. It's not anything concerning, but it'll wake you up. And that's why we see in the spring where it almost seems quiet on the lake, like you stop hearing that. And that's kind of the first sign that's like, oh, okay, the ice is kind of maxed out and it's going to start going the other way. So if it's eerily quiet on the ice and it's not banging and cracking fairly often, that pretty much means that ice is kind of maxed out and it's going to start deteriorating the other way. And so that's when you also have to start being more careful.
Kind of another thing to think about when you're out there is to avoid moving water, creeks, rivers, culverts. That water could be warmer coming in, and also with moving water, that ice isn't going to build as fast because it's got water moving past it, so it's not able to build. So just be safe when you're around that. That ice could be thinner. And then also too, as you're going to different depths, having a good map of the lake is a good idea. You could have, 4 to 6 inches fishing in 15 feet of water, not realize you get to a big drop off, 60 to 80 feet, especially Blue Mesa, we have those big drops. That ice is not going to be as thick because that water is going to take longer to cool down. So it's going to be warmer water. So that ice is not going to be able to build as fast over those deeper areas. So you see that a lot too, where guys are walking out there, they tested the ice 4 to 6 inches, they think they're good, they just start walking out without testing the ice and they fall through, and that's where they're hitting those deeper water columns and that ice is not as thick.
So yeah, when you're using your spud bar, use it the whole way.
Yeah.
Until you stop moving. Use it the whole time. And then if you move to drill a new hole, use your spud bar. In all honesty, it's not my favorite time of year to be out there. And so I'm as cautious as you could get out there.
Yeah.
Especially with my kids. Because let's be honest, how often do kids just follow behind you in a straight line? They never do. It never happens. So if you got kids, if you got pets, be sure, go out first or however you need to do it. Make sure the ice is solid under you. It's structurally sound, because kids are going to be running around. They're going to be crazy. And you want to make sure that in the end, everyone makes it back off the ice safely.
So another thing to think about too when you're going out on the ice is not just the weight of yourself, but all of your gear as well, including, your sled you're pulling behind you, your auger, fish finders, heaters, your hut. Keep in mind of a general idea of what all of those weigh, including yourself, to make sure that you are not going to be overweight for the ice thickness that you are on. And then kind of another thing that's more Blue Mesa specific, but you can check your regs for your specific lake, are rules and regulations for motorized vehicles, whether it be ATVs, snowmobiles, anything like that. Blue Mesa does have a speed limit, which is 45 miles an hour. You see a lot of these guys ripping on their snowmobiles going super fast. So just keep in mind that they could be checking that and they can write you a ticket for going too fast. I personally don't like going super fast because that ice can vary. You could hit a ridge, you could hit a bump, a snowdrift, something like that. Going at those speeds, it is not going to feel too great.
No. Yeah, no. Ugh, no. I'm sitting here like, nope.
Also, Blue Mesa, you have to have your snowmobile ATV registered, so it has to be registered through Parks and Wildlife, and there is a 2,000-pound limit on the ice as well. So you see some of these bigger four-seaters, big cabs. So just make sure you know what the weight of your vehicle is so you are not over that limit.
So again, like Cody said, check the regulations for that kind of stuff, depending on where you're going to go ice fishing, to see there's, a lot of city lakes and stuff, or certain park lakes that don't allow any kind of motorized vehicles. So, don't get excited about bringing your snowmobile and a big hut and a bunch of stuff, thinking you're going to motor all over the place and get somewhere and then realize you have to walk. So just kind of do a little research on that. That'll help you prepare a little bit too.
In the end, we just hope you all have a very safe ice season. Make sure you have your checklist if you need one, to make sure you have all of this stuff with you before you head out to the lake. If you go to episode 12 of the Level Up Fishing Podcast, we actually have our checklist. You can download it and use it however you need. We hang it on our garage door. And make sure you have everything before you head out to the lake. And if you've never been out on the ice, and it can be somewhat intimidating on where to even start, you can hire a guide to take you out. Ask them, do some research. Ask them if they are willing to teach you what to do from start to finish, from bringing what stuff to bring to the lake, to how to set up your hut, to how to drill your holes and set up sonar, things like that. Hire a guide. There is so many people that hire us in the winter simply because they want to get started, but they don't know where to start. And that is a fantastic place to start.
And kind of going along with that, there's so much different equipment out there that you can get, and you might not know if you need it or want to spend the money on that. We have a lot of equipment that you can kind of see how we use, what we have, and if it's something that you think you will need.
That's a great point. So we want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Level Up Fishing podcast, and thank Cody for joining us today.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. It was great to talk about this, and hopefully you guys learned something and can use this to stay safer on the ice.
Yeah.
So for Stormy and Cody, I am Andy, and we will see you on the water.